For all of you that are watching us in the internet. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Maria Teresa Baldassarre from University of Bari. Maria Teresa is a software engineering researcher, very strong in the field. Is member of the International Software Engineering Research Network, that is the major player in empirical software engineering, experimental software engineering in the globe. And I see that she's gonna say some words about who she is. All right, but my intention here is to mainly to have the opportunity to listen the talk and then introduce her to you. And thank you her for being here. She is visiting Brazil in a joint cooperation between the PUC-Rio and Programa de Sistemas at COPPE. And it's promoted, her visit is being funded by the CAP program. And we are sharing Teresa in the two sites. That's the reason, because she is here some days, is there other days.
And some days at the beach.
Being worked a lot. So Teresa, thank you for coming, and all the audience is yours.
So thank you. I'm very happy to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. And here at COPPE, here at Rio, in Rio, especially considering that in Italy right now it's winter, so it's cold. So being here in the summer clothes is also very nice. So today I just going to talk a little bit of some of the recent research that I have been conducting, two of the latest research studies that I have conducted with my some co-authors. But before getting into the topic, just a quick introduction on myself. I am Maria Teresa Baldassarre. I'm from the University of Bari in Italy, in South Italy, and there I am an associate professor at the Dipartimento di Informatica and part of the software engineering research laboratory, where I am coordinator of the process and product quality area. So our lab has different areas. I am in charge of the process and product quality area. I am also a partner of the Set and Practices, which is a spin-off company of our department of our university. And here I am also in charge, I'm a quality manager, so in charge of all of the quality procedure processes and so on. And as Guilherme was saying, I'm also a member of the International Software Engineering Research Network. It's an international network with all the best software engineers in the world. Correct, Guilherme? So just to give you some context here, the Dipartimento of Informatica is in Bari. Italy is like a boot, kind of, and so Puglia, which is of course the nicest region of Italy, is on the heel. It's like faces the sea. Bari is right on the sea, so it has a nice seaside. Like Rio, a little bit different, but we have the sea, you guys have the oceans, we have smaller beaches, you have larger beaches, but you know, the feeling is the same. We are both Latino. So as I said, the department is in the Campus Universitario, where all of the scientific faculties are located. And Bari is not only university, Puglia is not only university, it is also a beautiful place to live, stay, visit. So again, I know that one of Guilherme's students will be in Puglia, will be visiting Bari, and he'll get a taste and a feel of all of this. And hopefully, we will also have Guilherme as visiting us as a professor. So we have a little bit of good stuff. This is the Italian version of the
Pastel.
Of pastel, yes. So you can see which is better if you like. Anyways, so there are lots of things to see and do in Puglia as a tourist as well. So getting back to the serious stuff, as I said, I am part of the software engineering research laboratory. Focus is on software engineering. We have different areas of security engineering, software engineering for healthcare, project process management, and I am in charge, as I said before, of the process and product quality area of the lab. And in this sense, my research interests focus on software process and product quality, quality assessment, human factors in software engineering, and of course, empirical studies in software engineering. I teach in undergraduate and in graduate courses. So in undergraduate, I teach software quality, and then the graduate course, security, project management for security. And the Dipartimento of Informatica has approximately, in terms of numbers, about 50 staff, permanent staff members. We have approximately 500 new enrolled undergraduate students every year. About 100 graduate students and about 15 PhD students every year that enroll in our courses. So it's pretty big. And just referring to the fact that we are a software engineering research laboratory, our mission is basically that of conducting and executing our research projects, mainly focused on application of agile development processes that are focused on user and also quality. So it's not only development, but it's also development with a particular focus on the human aspects, on users, with particular focus also on quality orientation. So it also implies involving certifications in the development process using tools such as Q1, SonarQube, Jira, that allow to monitor the execution of the processes of the project and so on. And as we do not only focus on basic research, but the idea is to, as in being a software engineering research laboratory, always have a focus on industry, on the application of the research results. Our research results don't remain in the lab, but they are developed in order to have some kind of focus and application in the real world. Okay, so with this in mind, we in 2006 we developed the spin-off company called Software Engineering Research and Practices. So it's the software engineering part of the research, but which is applied in practice and in real context. So it was born from an effort of 4 professors of the software engineering lab at the time, and some University of Bari plus some companies, and now today it boasts 30 full-time employees, many projects, and it is continuously growing. Indeed, we are in search of more space all the time, and within the company, I am responsible for, I'm the quality manager, and therefore I also follow the certifications. Set and Practices is also certified ISO, quality management systems, environmental management, and also systems and software engineering. In particular, with respect to this last quality certification, we were the first the first company in Italy and the 4th in Europe to have a certified product, a certified software product according to the ISO standards. And so we can see that the idea of SERLab and Set and Practices is that there's a synergic blend in terms of the laboratory, which having contact with students, with the research projects, basically identifies and creates the research results and validates them through empirical studies. Once data and information is collected, and there we have validation, the research results are transferred to the industry. Okay, so Set and Practices has a very important role in the technology transfer, in transferring the results and applying them to industry. And in doing so, it also provides and creates the the context for carrying out empirical studies, for creating the context for where we can conduct our empirical studies, where we can collect evidence, have contact with software developers, working practitioners. So balance the research part with the practitioner part. And so Set Practices provides services and provides products that relate to the system design and development areas, also process and product quality, elements relating to security and solutions for secure systems, and also for project management, in the sense that we provide also support to companies in defining proposals, receiving grants, and accompanying them during the execution of the entire project. So due to this, in the years, we have built many research collaborations with the Software Engineering Research Laboratory, starting from ISERN, and they're building up on many collaborations with universities. As you can see, a large part of these collaborations are with Brazilian universities, two of which being right in Rio, so it's UFP and also PUC-Rio, UFRJ. And PUC-Rio are the two Brazilian, two of the universities that we strongly collaborate. Yeah, I guess that's why I'm here, right?
Yes.
And so having this mission of transferring the research results to industry has allowed us also to, as research laboratory and as spin-off company, to enforce many collaborations with companies of the ICT sector, of the regional area, so in Puglia, in Italy, and also with companies which are worldwide, companies like NTT Data, Helus, and so on. So providing solutions for that as well. So we can see that in the end, we as scientists, okay, we are in some way expected to produce research results which should not leave and stay in the laboratory, but research results which should be made available, produce artifacts and elements that are necessarily or should be reused by other researchers, by other folks. So the focus of the presentation, of today's presentation, is to debate on to what extent and how important is it to produce research results and produce artifacts and evidence that can be actually reused by others in order to build up on knowledge and face those that are the aspects and the ultimate goals of science. So the presentation of today, and which is also the consequence of two of my latest research works, builds on a citation of Popper, according to which the ideas we can most trust are those that have been the most tried and tested. This indicating the importance of having research, of having results, and having those results able to be reproduced, replicated, reapplied in other contexts in order to build up, enforce, increase, and represent more and more knowledge. So again, as scientists and as researchers, we are expected, okay, to produce and also report our research results. We are constantly, because it represents also the basis for career progression, for evaluations on behalf of research groups, staff members, even universities. So I'm aware that, for example, in Brazil, you have the CAPES evaluation. So universities are ranked on levels from 1 to 7 based on the research projects, the grants, the students, the quality of publications, and so on. So it's not only a matter of publishing, but it is also a matter of publishing in a way that the results and the findings can be reused and made available to other researchers who can access them, and therefore improve concepts of reproducibility and transparency. Okay, and so what happens is that during, let's say, their career, okay, I'm sure that every scientist, every researcher, every PhD student has ended up having to face what is called as the results paradox, okay? Debating on how do I focus on my research, how do I carry out my research, how do I comment and report my research. So the results paradox basically means that a researcher during his career will probably find himself, on one hand, in a situation where in their career, scientists are taught that they have to be rigorous, be like detectives, where they follow data with discipline as an objective investigator, never indulging on data massaging, kind of moving the data around to make it fit with what our intentions are, cherry picking. So if these are the results, I will just choose a little piece of them because they're the ones that best fit into what we want to achieve, and they'll make up a very nice publication. So on one side we are how can I say pushed to rely on facts and truth and be as rigorous as possible. On the other hand, however, we are constantly pressured by publishing results, publishing good results, publishing significant results, publishing things and artifacts, coming out with ideas that are then evaluated and ranked in our university and ranked as personal profiles. So this in some way means that the researcher in some cases has to be like a good lawyer, able to argument and produce beautiful, convincing stories around the published results. So a researcher is, during his life, kind of attempts to solve this paradox. And in solving this paradox, sometimes is also led to ending up applying questionable research practices, which in the end, at the end of the game, harm reproducibility. Okay, and produce artifacts and research results which are difficult to reproduce, which are not transparent, which are therefore end up, as they said, harming science. So some of these questionable research practices that may end up being that scientists may fall into, and so us also as researchers. And there is an important reference that I added here on the slide where these QPRs are analyzed more in depth, relate to, for example, harking, which means that first we carry out the study, we get the results, based on the results we pull out the hypothesis. So it's like a wrong retrospective approach in identifying the hypothesis. It should be the other way around. Okay. Again, post hoc rationalization. So basically, we have the data, and then we try to find the story that fits, that best fits the situation that has appeared following to the study. So we adapt the context, okay, based on what happened during the study. So whereas these approaches can be acceptable, okay, when we have an exploratory study, when we are defining or building theories where we don't know what direction we are taking. So it's kind of like exploring, let's see what happens. It is not acceptable when we have a confirmatory study. In confirmatory studies, we start from a hypothesis, from a context, from clear elements that have to be validated. So it's just a matter of executing the study and validating or rejecting those situations. So we can't fall into these practices, or we shouldn't at least. Other situations that can occur are the file drawer effect. That is, so we carry out our study and the results are negative. So what do we do? Okay, let's just pretend nothing happens and just put it in our cupboard there. And nobody knows anything. And this is also harmful. Okay, why is it harmful? Because not publishing negative results means basically not having knowledge, okay, not having awareness of these results when we carry out the secondary studies, so when we carry out a systematic literature review, or when we carry out a meta-analysis, okay, they don't appear, they don't come out. So it seems like everything is beautiful, there's nothing bad ever happens, okay, so it's a misconception of what actually happens in reality. And I must say that in this sense, the community is becoming a little bit more aware, because now there are some conferences that have negative results tracks, so they kind of promote, the reason and justifications of receiving negative results, or there are also special tracks also in journals. So we see a little bit more of things happening around the negative effects and avoiding this file drawer effect. And again, another misconception is the forking paths in data analysis choices. So first we carry out the data analysis, or first we have the data, and then we decide which kind of data analysis we're going to carry out, and then which statistical tests are more appropriate for the data, whereas it should be the other way around. So this leads to researcher bias. And so how has the community been facing these problems? Through what we call registered reports. So in 2012, approximately, registered reports have been introduced in, of course, social sciences, psychology, medical fields, as a way to free the researchers from the pressure to engage in questionable research practices and being led to conduct to fall into researcher bias. So the idea of the registered reports is to avoid results orientation approaches, but and therefore deal with the researcher bias, because it requires that the plan be published and be defined before actually carrying it out. And so the idea with registered reports is to focus on soundness of the research and of the results and of the research questions, of the research plan and the research questions before carrying out the study. So it relies on the concept of pre-registration. So pre-registration means it is very typical in use in clinical domains. So in clinical domains, it is like a requirement to have a pre-registration. Pre-registration means basically that the study is registered in a protocol, and the protocol includes the plan, so the hypotheses, the analysis, the research question, the motivation, the methodology that is going to be used. All of this is registered in a protocol, and so having a protocol which is registered in some way, it's formalized. Okay, having a protocol commits the researcher to what is in the protocol. Okay, so it's kind of like when you carry out a systematic literature review. In systematic literature review, the first step is to define the protocol. Okay, once that protocol is validated and accepted, executing the DSLR means sticking to that protocol. Okay, and the difference of registered, the boost, okay, that we have in registered reports is that they are a peer-reviewed pre-registration. So it is a pre-registration where the researcher identifies and includes a set of information relating to the plan, the research plan, and it is peer-reviewed by other reviewers, which give feedback on the registered report, and then the report is registered in some open archive, like archive, like Open Science Foundation, and so on. So it is publicly available. Okay, so we can see that the benefits of registered reports is that first they provide a first moment of feedback. okay? Because a researcher receives a peer review from other reviewers, which allow to get some early feedback before actually engaging and carrying out the research and spending effort, money, and so on, and allowing to fix, you know, the organization and the general plan of the research. It reduces and eliminates underpowered researcher biased studies, because being reviewed ahead of time, being logically structured, okay, it avoids the researcher in being tempted by adopting the questionable research practices or falling into questionable research practices. And so, all in all, it improves the study quality, and having a better study, a higher quality study, the scientific impact is also consequently expected to be better and to be higher. So we can see how here, this is in other contexts, how in the latest years, starting from 2013, where the research reserve, where the registered reviews have been adopted in the Cortex journal, have slowly have incremented and have been always more and more in the past years until 2019. And this is a snapshot as of June 2019 with respect to many journals in the social sciences and psychology domains. What about software engineering? Well, in software engineering, the concept of registered reports has been introduced since 2020. Okay, and it has been introduced as as a model journal plus conference, or as conference plus journal. So, well, one part of the study relates to specific conferences, and then the second phase is connected to the Empirical Software Engineering Journal. The first conferences that started with the concept of registered reports was the MSR conference, followed by ICSME, ESM starting 2021. And now, starting this year, other conferences are have started also to introduce the concept of registered reports. So we find them also in tracks of Chase, Sanner, ICPC. TOSEM, the ACM, Transactional Software Engineering and Measurement, has also introduced the concept of registered reports, but this registered papers, but this follows a journal-only model. So it's the entire registered report process is included and followed by the journal. So the concept of registered reports is that we have a first stage. It has two stages. The first stage is the plan stage. The second stage is the results stage, and therefore this then leads to the publication. So in stage one, the researchers define the plan, submit the proposal of the protocol, and the protocol basically consists of an outline of 6 pages approximately, where the researcher specifies information like the introduction, the motivation of the study, the analysis, the research questions, and so on. So it defines the context, the operationalization, and so everything that is focused on the plan. Okay, the plan is therefore submitted. It represents the protocol, and it undergoes review. Okay, peer review. In particular, with what relates to the software engineering, the stage one is usually handled by a conference. Okay, so the conference that can be MSR, ICSME, ESM, and so on, will receive the registered reports, will have a committee, a program committee, will submit the the protocols for review, for peer review, and there is therefore usual interaction among reviewers and authors who get a final feedback. So the conclusion of stage one, okay, the conclusion of stage one is basically a review. Okay, the review, which is in principle acceptance, IPA, which means that the structure of the study is appropriate to be executed. Okay, so the plan is okay, it's sound, and so on, and it can be carried out. At that point, the protocol is registered. Registration occurs on platforms like Open Science Foundation rather than Archive. In the case of in our software engineering conferences, all published IPA reports have been published, are published on Archive. Okay, and so at that point, once the registered report has a in principle acceptance, stage two begins. So the authors have at that point 1 year, 12 months usually to carry out the study, report the study, and submit the paper, the final paper to the journal. Okay, so the paper then goes, the study is conducted, and if all goes well, the paper is submitted to the journal and undergoes peer review, and then it follows the normal process. Okay, so the idea is that thanks to the registered reports, the first phase allows to establish and stabilize, okay, the process, and in the second stage it's easier and more straightforward to carry out the study. So the review criteria that are applied in phase one basically looks into the study to see if it is novel, if it is significant, if it is able to find the effects. So reviewers look into aspects such as the plan, okay, in terms of the importance of the research questions, if the proposed hypothesis makes sense, their logic, they have some kind of rationale, depending on the motivation of the study and the objective of the study. If the methodology that the researcher intends to apply is clear, is sound, is technically sound, and so on. And if the hypotheses indeed stand with respect to the selection of the tests that are identified. So it's more of a review of the plan, okay, and it allows for confrontation and feedback before the study is actually carried out. Whereas in phase two, once the study has received its IPA, so the principal acceptance has been carried out and therefore turns out into a paper, the paper is reviewed in terms of questioning if the authors executed phase one plan and if the results are coherent with the plan. So questions like the hypotheses are wrong or the analysis choice is incorrect cannot or should not be included in the review because these aspects have already been overcome, faced, and confronted in the first part of in the first phase, in phase one. So it's basically concentrated, focused on the soundness of the results, the soundness of the methodology, being coherent in terms of execution of the study with the research plan. Okay, and then the discussion of results and so on. Okay, so it's more of if there are any differences, changes in the analysis rather than modifications, how these are and whether they are also justified. So what we did as me and Neil Ernst are currently the registered reports co-chairs in empirical software engineering journal. So basically what we do is we have been on many of the committees related to the conferences, and then we handle the stage. So we have handled some stage 1, but we mainly handle all of stage 2. And so after the first registered report, let's say event connected to MSR, we carried out a survey was carried out with 25 respondents among reviewers and authors to get some feedback. And in general, we had the feedback that we received seems to be quite positive. So here, just to give you some ideas, a feeling of what the feedback was related to MSR 2020 edition on the in-principle acceptance. Generally speaking, reviewers and authors agree on the fact that having a two-stage process with the registered reviews does actually raise the bar in the quality of the produced in the quality of the studies, because it does focus, at least in the first stage, on the methodological issues. So on the soundness of the methodology, the research questions, the hypothesis, the selection of analysis, etc. Because the reviewer focuses on the plan, and because there are no results yet. Okay. So in general, we have received 100% positive impact on behalf of who carried out the first, let's say, edition of registered reports. And this snapshot here gives you an idea of how, related to the venues, how many submissions we have received in stage 1, how many of these have been transferred to in-principle acceptance, and therefore how many have also led to stage 2. Of course, due to COVID and pandemics, the timing of many of the publications has a little bit been stretched out, okay, and ended up being a little bit longer than it should. But basically, the idea is that from the in-principle acceptance, and therefore from the date of the conference, from the date of the in-principle acceptance, authors have 12 months to carry out, complete the study, and submit the paper. Okay, so within this 12-month period, the process should then be started in terms of stage 2. So, in spite the idea, there are, it's not all beautiful. I mean, there are pros and cons in registry reports. The pros that we can see are, for sure, it allows to achieve and turn to shareable protocols for research replication. And this is because the research protocol is published, okay, and it is publicly available on an archive. And therefore, any other researchers interested in replicating that study can surely replicate or access, okay, the information of the study. The two-stage review allows, as I said before, to focus on the research, okay, on the research structure, because you're focusing first on the protocol, on the structure of the research before actually going into the details of how the analysis was carried out, what kind of data is pulled out, and so on. So it also improves rigor in reporting, because having defined a protocol when you have to report the data, it is a little bit easier. So it improves also the quality of how the study is reported, and so how the final paper in stage 2 is actually structured, submitted, and so on. And it's nice to also have the early peer review in the research approach. So if something is wrong, if something is flawed, if there are limitations in the study, they should come out before actually carrying out the study. So the comments such as the research results, the research questions are not focused, hypotheses are weak, etc., should not happen in stage 2, because they're going to happen, should happen in stage 1. Of course, this means more research on behalf of effort on behalf of researchers, because we need more effort for defining the protocol, formalizing it, registering it, also for peer reviewing it. Okay, so we need more effort in terms of peer reviews. It is also not common to many journals, so as of now, it is only something that is common to some conferences, and therefore the stage 2 that handles the registered reports is only in Empirical Software Engineering Journal and in the TOSA recently, starting from 2022. And also, it is not necessarily all research strategies are registerable. Okay, so it works particularly for post-positivist confirmatory studies where we have clear idea on hypotheses. Okay, where it works a little bit less with qualitative research, mining studies, theory building, and so on, where we have like exploratory, where we don't have clear awareness of what's going on. So it's kind of things that you discover as the study goes on. So in general, we can see that registered reviews have these 3 phases in the sense that they prevent the questionable research practices because you tell the world what you want to do and then you actually do it. You find a protocol, you have it validated. Once it's IPA, you actually carry out the study. It is important. It can be the fact that it gives early feedback in research process is also an advantage, and it can be something seen positively, especially as basis of doctoral symposiums, as for PhD students. So as SLRs are important to kind of have an idea of what the literature is. A registered report could also be a good approach to get quick feedback on what is going to be the research before it is actually conducted. Again, it is interesting and positive to have the idea of having first round of review in the IP with the IPA. Of course, registered reports are not easy to handle. I mean, there are many administrative challenges, many of which relate to the fact that being connected to the conference, there are different review boards, we have different program committees, and so the management of the papers and the history of the papers is difficult to track. And the systems, like technical systems used, like hot CRP rather than easy chair for the conferences, and the editorial manager for the journal do not communicate. Okay, so what we have ended up doing is using manual track and progress with our Google Drives, listening and interfacing with the track chairs of the conferences, seeing who the reviewers were, and so on. Because the idea is that the reviewers of stage 1, okay, also commit to reviewing stage 2, okay, and because they're the ones that have provided feedback and making the improvements, changes to the first version of the protocol. And so it is expected that reviewers that have reviewed the first part are also engaged in stage 2. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen because between stage 1 and stage 2, you have at least a time span of 1 year. Okay, so although you do engage reviewers in committing to stage 2, it is very recent. It is very common, and this I can say as track chair of the journal, that reviewers turn you down. Say, no, I'm sorry, I'm too busy, my cat died, or whatever, I can't. And so this puts in a difficult position because you have to also invite then new reviewers who are in some way knowledgeable, not necessarily of that study, but knowledgeable on the concept of registered reports, okay, because it's not just a regular paper. They have to also go into the stage 1 and be introduced to the stage 2. So it does increase the burden in terms of who has to manage the process as well as who has to also carry out the reviews. And other aspects that arise are the conflict of interest. What happens is that usually conferences are double-blind. So when you're reviewing stage one, you don't know, the reviewer doesn't know who the authors of the stage one protocol are. What may happen is that when those reviewers when the authors submit their stage two paper, the authors of the paper are known. And so in many cases, the reviewer tells you, oh, sorry, I do engage, I would like to review, however, I cannot because I have conflict of interest. And so, same problem, okay? And so we can say, like, wrapping up on the registered reviews, they do enhance reproducibility in that they introduce some form of standardization due to the protocol, thanks to the protocols, and that are also registered. We are in this way more likely to have, it is more likely therefore to also have negative results being published, being described. Reviewers also having the first step of feedback, we also have a higher chances of preventing flaws, okay? And so fixing things at the beginning before the research is actually carried out. And it is important to have the concept that registered reviews are not our plan, they're not a prison. So although there is a protocol, there is some kind of structure, it's not something that cannot be adapted, that cannot be changed, okay? The important thing is that there is some flexibility. We're talking about coherent changes, okay, motivated changes rather than airbrushing, like, okay, let's just take out these results because they don't fit well with what we want to write in the paper. And so in general, we can see that this leads to another research that I've also conducted. So ultimately, registered reports is about pre-specifying analysis. So we say ahead of time what we want to do. We say ahead of time which are the artifacts that we are going to generate in our published publication, and which is not only necessarily limited to a paper. Okay, so in producing research results, we can produce a set of artifacts, and it is important, as I said at the beginning, that these artifacts be in some way made available to others, and in order for them to be reused. So, in this sense, it is important that research results lead to artifact creation, sharing, and research and reuse. And we have to keep in mind that artifacts are not only publications, but they're also ideas, tools, data sets, methods, and it is these artifacts that then engage replication, they engage reproducibility. So it is important to find the best way possible to make this information available in order to capture reuse. So how do we as scientists capture reuse? There have been some notable, other than citation counting, okay, so citation counting is what unfortunately is only used when we have to be rated or classified as good university, bad university, good researchers, and bad researchers. But other than citation counts, which are not necessarily good, other approaches are, for example, the artifact evaluation committees and the concept of badging. So it is something that has been more and more introduced in the community from 2011 on. Some conferences use the concept of badging, okay? And what happens is that authors of accepted conferences submit their papers that include like the replication package or whatever kind of artifacts that can be tools or whatever else, to the artifact evaluation committees, which evaluate the artifacts and assess, attribute one of the badges depending on the level of the artifact. So if the artifact is available, if it's functional, reusable, reproduced, and replicated. This is obviously something that goes in parallel, okay, with the publication of the paper. So usually there's the track on the research track and then the artifacts track, where the artifacts that are in the paper are also evaluated, and therefore the paper gets like a logo. And this is just for reference, just to give you an idea. These are some of the ACM badges, but I mean there are also other badges that IEEE provides. So this slide just gives an idea of how from 2011, it's an idea, and it's from a research conducted from Herman et al., which is also one of the co-authors of my last publication. So how the Artifact Evaluation Committee sizes have increased from 2011 to 2019, how a wider range of conferences have adopted, many of which are software engineering conferences, have adopted the artifact evaluation committees, and how the number of submissions of papers to have their artifacts evaluated, certified, and badged have been increasing in the past years. So the question is, are artifact evaluation committees, and therefore this process, actually creating reused artifacts? I mean, once we have like this nice set of papers, badges, do people actually do other research? Is that enough for researchers to know about them and therefore use those artifacts in their research, and therefore reuse these results? Well, something came up, and it's what basically what motivated us to go towards a different representation, a different concept. Is the fact that we carried we queried the ACM portal related to ICSI papers from a time span 2011 to 2021, and we found that only less than 3% of these papers had artifact badges, okay, had actually been attributed a badge, first of all. And the second result is that of these, only like we had 111 were tagged as badged as available, 74 as reusable, 24 as functional, and there were no replicated or reproduced artifacts. So none of the artifacts that had been subject to badging procedures had been classified by replicated or reproduced. So this kind of rang a bell, okay, on the importance of having reproducible, replicatable results, although no evidence, okay? So another approach, this led us to the creation of what we call research graph, okay, something that is not restricted to the digital libraries, to profit organizations, and so on. This seems very crazy, but the concept is that we considered, in terms of approach, a set of researchers read a select set of 170 software engineering papers, which we extracted from 2020 year of software engineering venues. So it was like ICSI, EXAM, MSR, ASE, and ICSME. So the major software engineering conferences. What we did, the teams were asked to record 6 times of possible reuse. And
in doing so, they used a system, and it pulled out a set of nodes and edges. So focusing on one of these nodes in here. Okay, basically, if we close up on it, the figure shows how, with respect to every publication, okay, that publication explicits the type of reuse. So the reuse can be the reuse of a methodology, of a tool, of a data set, of statistical analysis, and so we have six types of reuse. And with respect to that type of reuse, every type of reuse is specified with respect to the type. So the red node means, for example, that this is a paper in archive that has reused the methodology of the original submission. The green means that this GitHub repository has used the tool specified in this artifact in the publication. The gray is gray literature. The blue is a publication. So Morin et al. Have cited Bernal because they use the data set. So they have reused the data set of that publication and so on. So this is just to give you a clear an idea of what our focus has been to what we think is important to entice and promote the reuse and replication of sets. And as compendium to this, we also are, in order to constantly update research graph. It is an open research graph. Any researchers can contribute and collaborate. And in this sense, one of the venues is the ROSE initiative. It's rewarding open science replication and reproduction in software engineering, because it means it's like a workshop that we are organizing in major venues like ICSI or FSC, and it will be conducted in also this year's ICSI. So if anybody is going to be at ICSI, it will be organized on the second day during the lunch break. And again, the idea is to identify artifacts, publications that can be included and in the research graph, in order to promote repeatability, reproducibility, and replicability, and therefore actually promote reuse of research artifacts. So this is in general the idea. I would like to take some time to give credit and special thanks to the co-authors of the papers recently published. There's a registered reports in software engineering editorial where Neil Ertz and I illustrate what registered reports are, how they are conducted, what the idea of empirical journal, MC journal is with respect to registered reports. And again, thanks to my other co-authors on the recent paper on communications of the ACM, where we introduced the concept of the research graph and also promote the concept and invite other researchers around the world to be part of the initiative. And there's also a little video that has been made as compendium to the ACM paper. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Teresa, for the talk and for raising so important scientific issues. Well, it's quite important that we can get more mature in the field. So it's quite nice. It's a lot of work involved in that, a lot of discussions along the last decades.
yes.
And it's nice to see the materialization of the reuse of those discussions on this work. So I would like to open for questions. I don't know if the audience here would like to. Please, Professor Cláudia Werner.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your talk. I wasn't aware of this kind of initiative and research and this kind of thing. I myself have been working a long time with software reuse in general, and I was asking myself all the time, because we have kind of, a list of problems in software reuse in general, and all this list can be used here. And I'll start saying that I do a lot of research also, not on the same field as you are working, but once I tried to replicate an experiment, and at that time, maybe 10 years ago or something, I felt that it was not welcome, as you just mentioned here. Replicated things? No, we don't want that. So one of the first questions that in software reuse we make is what we call the psychological aspect. Do people actually want to reuse other things? That's the first question that you make. And normally not. And more than that, because you are working in this idea of register report, right? And which is mostly the protocol first, and then the other artifacts. And you just mentioned, of course, all the artifacts are welcome to be reused, and some of them are more difficult, some of them are easier. But most of the time, the questions we want to make as a researcher are not quite the same. And we need a little bit, first of all, we need to know what it's registered already, to see if we're not replicating something that is already there. And most of the time, we want to do something slightly different. And I didn't actually listen to this, worry in your talk. Maybe you have passed to this thing. So maybe I'll just focus in these two things. One is the psychological aspect of reusing things, and the other one is that, yes, we reuse, but most of the time we're actually adapting what we are reusing. Yeah. So how do you see those two questions in your context?
So for sure, I think it's so the concept of registered reports and also the artifacts, the committees, the badging, and this ultimate concept of a research graph, they are fairly new to the community. We have been using them, although they are common and well known at this point in other communities, as you see from 2012 already, because knowledge on registered reports. So there are many registered reports. In software engineering, at least, we're talking about less than 50, within the past 2 years, 3 years. Okay, so that means that there's currently, I think, less awareness on the concept. Okay, less awareness also of the psychological. Let me go see on archive if there are registered reports in this sense, and therefore see what other people are doing. If some research has already been done, what can I do to increase, to evolve, to implement something different, more, and so on. So I think there is maybe even a psychological barrier, let's call it like that, because there is little awareness. There's not enough awareness yet. So my idea is that with registered reports, with reuse graphs, the community also becomes more aware of the fact that it's not a bad thing to reuse. It's not a bad thing to build on others, on other researchers' results, because that's the reason of science. I mean, the first slide was what Papa said. What does a scientist do? It builds on research results of others. So if we don't have or refer to other research results, it makes no sense. And this was, I think, also an obstacle at the beginning of systematic literature reviews. Whereas now they have evolved over the years and are more common in software engineering. Many SLRs have been conducted, and so this also leads us to being able to carry out the secondary studies. So you can do meta-analysis, you can do further type of analysis because you have more secondary studies. So I think it's, I agree with what you say. I find myself, there are aspects that with my co-authors we debated, we have debated a lot. And so this has also motivated us to push towards the concept of research graphs, reuse graphs. Okay, because it is structures like these reuse graphs that pull you out of the big corporations like ACM, IEEE, and so on, making this data publicly available. Okay, where it is easy to know, to see what the paper presents, what artifacts it makes available, and how this can be used for use. And this is also been supported by the concept of registered artifacts. So I think I have a positive, how can I say, insight, okay? And from here to, 10 years, hopefully less, but the community will become more and more aware. I see it, since 2020, there have been more registered reports, more conferences wanting registered reports, more researchers structuring their research in terms of phase 1, phase 2, and so on. Because I think it's the positive perception that is developing. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So to be fair, just to be fair with our audience in the internet, we have some questions here. So there is a question from Professor Edson Oliveira Jr. that's from Universidade Estadual de Maringá, in the Paraná State. Yeah. Edson is asked to engage the community on preparing submitting registered reports. You think a published registered report should count as a publication as any other paper?
So this is no, because the registered report is actually the outline. So it's important certainly to promote, and that's why the registration has to be registered. So the papers are ultimately registered on archive rather than Open Science Foundation. The important part is to have the report. The report can be presented, it is actually presented in the conferences. So registered reports that are connected to conferences have a moment of presentation at the conference where the community is made aware. Okay, there's awareness on that study, and that study is also listed in the page of the conference. Okay, and it therefore promotes the stage 2 part. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Although this is for what concerns the conference journal kind of formula. The model of POSM has everything connected in the journal. So basically, the first stage is connected to the second, and when the paper is published, then it counts as one publication.
Okay, nice. Edson is replying here because I'm reading in the YouTube. I agree, as in medicine, it's not a publication, it's a requirement. So it's a nice perspective.
It's a publicly made available requirement.
Yes. Rafael, please.
Thank you, Teresa, for the presentation. I think I was in the first introduction of those initiative. I think it was 4 years ago at Canada. I think so. We had a meeting. We discussed that badges. It was very, very interesting. I have a question for you about the applications. What do you think about the concerns of researchers on reporting the replication? I mean, because not only about replicating some protocol, but also reusing, for instance, you have a published paper with related work, background, and we have an future in software engineering to write a lot, to compare. And sometimes you need to, what is software use? Software use is this, software use is that. If you have a paper already published, many papers writing about that, discussing literature about that. When you publish and you made a replication, you need to write again. Some reviewers are more concerned about this, about the self-containing and so on. What are the challenges that you imagine to overcome this culture of I need to write too much, I need to write 10 pages, 11 pages, 10 pages is more reference, plus reference. So how do you see that?
So the way I see it, I think that the question is not the publication itself. Okay, because the paper has to be a self-consistent paper, blah, blah, blah. I think the added value, okay, is the artifacts that are connected to that paper. So being sure that the publication is supported by artifacts, okay, that are external to the publication. And the artifacts can be tools that work and that are implementable and that are clearly described, okay, in the replication package if I'm going to carry out a controlled experiment or whatever, that is consistent and it is an artifact that others can use, okay. So I think it's not just the publication itself, okay, but it necessarily nowadays has to be supported by artifacts that again can be methodologies, tools, replication packages, and so on. Like, some of which are the 6 categories that we took into consideration in building this first attempt of reuse ground, okay? Because that's what makes the difference.
But I mean, how do you see that you should report those replications, for instance? Do I need to write again? Because maybe some psychological factor. I replicate this, and I also need to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about having to repeat the same things that the other guys already did. Right? It's more of reporting the additional added value, the motivation. So even in conducting and defining a stage 1, if you were to do this through a registered report, the registered report should identify the motivations and the strategies, what the added value is, not necessarily just be limited to because everyone can say repeating things. It's not reusing, it's just repeating.
There is a great discussion. There is a comment here from Professor José Carlos Maldonado. Great talk and directions. Please, thank you for that. And I have also a couple of questions here that I will try to combine them from Professor Diego Dutra. That it's regarding the beginning of your talk about the industrial collaboration. All right. So may you extend your discussion on industrial interactions and the overall benefits of going over the initial hurdle that sometimes separates the university lab from the industry? And in a continuity, would you suggest that younger researchers and professors broaden their intersection with industrial partners?
So I don't know if for me, research has to be connected to industry because otherwise it doesn't make sense. So I think necessarily if my research ends up staying in my
There is no
garage,
software engineering without engineering something.
I don't know, the engineers and the software engineering, if I don't see a practical application of my results, they're not results. I don't consider them results. Okay. And in doing so, even the structure of our research laboratory and of our courses foresee continuous collaboration with industries. So our students carry out projects in undergrads and in graduate courses. It's not just reading the book, it's applying those concepts in a project, even if it's small, okay, that has some sort of feedback and communication with companies. So even the final projects that undergrads carry out, or the grads carry out here at the project, every single one of those projects is related to a research project, and all of our research projects have an industrial component. So we're producing something interesting for the industry, something that has to be transferred. That's why the technology transfer is so important. So at least for me, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's like necessary.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
For me, if it's not there, it's
Yeah.
it's not necessary research.
So who owns the intellectual property? The university, the professor, the company? Where you're doing this technology transfer in your?
So in this case, it's it depends, because usually we have the projects, and so the intellectual property is of the industry if you're developing something for the industry. Like the research laboratory or the spin-off, if it's something that is originally of the spin-off or of the company of the research, and that is being provided to the company. So it depends, because we have in some cases, projects where there's like a partnership, and so the project is funded, okay, on a research collaboration among the university as a partner plus 2 or 3 a set of companies. As well as there are also other cases where the companies come to us and ask for a consultancy, and so in that case, we are developing something specifically for them. So it depends on the context. But it always has industry necessary.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's good.
I don't waste my time on building, basically, on doing something that nobody's going to do.
One last question from here.
Professor Teresa, thank you for your presentation. I'm a student here at PESC, doctoral student. I like to backtrack a little in the register reports. When you were outlining the disadvantage and what the reviewers see in the register reports, you told that there are some research strategies that the reviewers that is actually not prone to register reports. In terms of these research strategies, methods in the research strategies, is there any method that is more favored than others in?
Yes, so in the courses of research methodologies, the report reference of story 2020, and so we can say that the research methodologies we can distinguish in exploratory or confirmatory. So registered reports are probably more appropriate for confirmatory studies, where we already have a clear idea and understanding of the hypothesis, of the structure, of the direction where we want to go. Okay, we're going to do theory testing, for example, or confirming some hypotheses or confirming some studies. Okay, whereas because there you can identify the protocol and have a clear idea on the procedures and the process, the motivation, the hypotheses, the tests that you're going to do.
Okay.
Whereas when you have studies that are more exploratory, so even qualitative studies, surveys, where you don't, theory building, okay, not the theory testing, where you don't have a clear idea of where you're going. You have to explore, okay? So you may set some hypotheses, but they will maybe change. You define some strategies, but they may be changed depending on how things progress, how the exploration goes, okay? So in that case, registering a protocol, the registry reports may be less appropriate.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to thank you, Teresa. A last comment, Professor Sérgio Soares is congratulating your talk from Recife, Pernambuco. And I would like to thank you, all the audience here and all the audience in the internet for following this talk. We are on time for some lunch. Okay, and thank you.
Thank you, everybody. All of the people. I wasn't expecting so many researchers online.
Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, we got them all.
No.